Start, Sashi.
Shashi, are you ready?
Yeah. Bobby, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Shall I start?
Yeah, you can start. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone. This is the 45th class in a series hosted by the Stanford Hindu Students Association on the foundational texts of Indian philosophy, presented by Swami Tattwamayanandaji of the Vedanta Society of Northern California. We're very grateful for his instructions. Those of you who are watching on Zoom, please mute yourselves until the lecture is over, at which time there'll be an interaction, question and answer. During the question and answer, please use the raise hand function under reactions on Zoom. If you're watching on YouTube live, posting in comments, we'll scan those questions and we can ask them for you via the Zoom. And if you're watching later, all these classes are archived on the Vedanta Society's website at sfvedanta.org. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Swami Tattwamayanandaji.
Thank you, Bobby. Namaskar. Namaskar, everyone. Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupini avatara varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. So we are continuing our discussion on Ramanuja's system of Viśiṣṭādvaita. I won't repeat what I said at the very beginning. These apparent differences between these two systems have two perspectives. One, the philosophical, the other, spiritual. From philosophical or dialectical perspective, you can see different approaches of God, different ways of interpreting the same Upanishadic text, different and or diverse ways of interpreting the same Upanishadic text, which is interpreted in Advaitic perspective by Shankaracharya, in a monotheistic perspective by Ramanuja and other followers of Ramanuja system like Vedanta Desika, and also the great Tikakara who wrote a glose or Tika on Ramanuja's Sri Bhashya. So you will see these differences. That is from a philosophical, polemical, dialectical perspective. Now, from a spiritual perspective, which was perhaps modern times, it was first projected by Vivekananda in 19th century. Even in Dr. Radhakrishnan, you don't find that spiritual perspective so much emphasized. So Swami Vivekananda, for example, says, we begin with Dvaita, we progress towards Advaita, and in the process, we move through this intermediate period of Viśiṣṭādvaita. In other words, at the beginning of our spiritual life, we may think that God is somebody who listens to our prayers. He is different from us. Can you hear all of you? But
Yes, Mahatma.
but in this screen there is something missing. Anyway, I shall repeat. So sometimes we may feel that we are moving from the idea of God as a monotheistic concept, and we may interpret that God as somebody who can be defined in terms of certain characteristics and qualities. And as we move further, we may perhaps reach a stage which is a transcendental monistic idea, where we think of God as one supreme divine principle that is present in all of us. Now, this is linked to our own spiritual evolution. So, I was trying to mention one important thing. Ramanuja's teacher, Yadava Prakasha, he was a famous Advaitin of those times, under whom Ramanuja studied advanced texts. And he was teaching Advaita. And Ramanuja, being of a devotional temperament, could not fully appreciate his teacher's interpretation. And the Yadava Prakasha's own interpretation of Advaita was slightly different from Shankaracharya's original interpretation. Because in Shankara's system, devotion, the idea of God as a compassionate creator idea, that is accommodated and accepted in Shankaracharya's system, but Shankaracharya's system goes beyond that, without rejecting the idea of a monotheistic God. Now, Yadava Prakasha's interpretation was slightly different. It is some kind of a dry intellectual interpretation, which is actually a departure from Shankaracharya's own interpretation. This is an important point, remember. But then during the early years, when Ramanuja was growing up, there was perfect harmony, and there was a friendly relationship between the followers of Advaita and Viśiṣṭādvaita in those areas. But in later years, you find they became two separate sects, groups, who did not agree on anything. So you can see slowly this divergence becomes wider and wider, to such an extent that Ramanuja's greatest follower, who was Vedanta Deshika, who wrote a number of books. Actually, Vedanta Deshika was the one who established Ramanuja's system on a very sound philosophical basis after Ramanuja's times. And his name is well known because he saved a copy of Ramanuja's Bhashya with a Tika by a younger contemporary when Srirangam temple was invaded by Mohammedan invaders, and who destroyed many parts of the temple, and many of the priests were killed, and then there was a big persecution. It happened, and Ramanuja's follower, Vedanta Deshika, was found hiding somewhere with a single copy of Ramanuja's Bhashya with the Tika. Anyway, that's a historical story. That Vedanta Deshika makes a statement, Prachanna Bauddha Vishaye Parito Yadadhum. He writes his book in a very, very outright polemical work called Shadadushani, where he projects 100 objections against Advaita. So to give you an example. Now, this is in a way, it's a departure from Ramanuja's own system. So what I mean to say, at the polemical and dialectical level, we often find these conflicts, but you should always remember there was no persecution as such. Remember, this is all intellectual warfare mostly taking place among the scholars. To give an example, in Shankaracharya's system, Maya is not a category. Maya is essentially the cosmic principle of the inconsistency or impermanence or the relative nature or the non-absolute nature of the entire empirical phenomena. And it is something mysterious, something which is inconceivable and non-definable. Mahadbhuda Anirvachani Ruva in the Vivekachudamani Shankaracharya says, for example, Sannapi Asannapi Bhuyatmigano, Bhinnapi Abhinnapi Bhuyatmigano, Sangapi Asangapi Bhuyatmigano, Mahadbhuda Anirvachani Ruva. It's very interesting for us to follow and analyze how philosophical concept gets misrepresented by succeeding scholars. The same thing happened in some cases among the Advaitic polemical writers also in the 13th and 14th centuries, especially Sriharsha's Khandana, Khandakadya, and so on. It's a different thing. Now, Maya in Vedanta is not a category. It's an important thing to remember. Maya is a way of explaining this impermanent, inconsistent, relative phenomena, which cannot be called real in the absolute sense, because this world and the phenomenal world doesn't remain the same in the past, present and future. So it doesn't qualify for the status of absolute reality or paramarthika satta. Brahman is only paramarthika satta. So it is one way of explaining the basic principle of the inconsistency of empirical world. This is what Maya actually implies in Advaita Vedanta. Also, the classical interpretation of Mithyatvam found in Panchapadika Vivarana, then of course in other books like Tattwamayanandaji, Chitsukhi, Nyayadipavali, in all these books you can find this way of explaining mithya as something which cannot be called real or unreal, because it is not absolutely real, it is not absolutely unreal. So in a way, what is Maya? Maya is a way of explaining this inexplicable, inescapable experience that we find. So for example, if you find a heap of pots and pans made of clay, on the one hand, those pots and pans cannot be called unreal, because you take a pot made of clay or you take a cup made of clay, you can drink water. You cannot say it is unreal, it is different from a heap of clay. When you break it, it becomes a heap of clay. So it is real, but only in a relative level. Clay is real, pots and pans are only relative. Nama, Rupa. This is the essence of Maya. Now what happened was, in Ramanuja's system, especially after Ramanuja's passing away, and this happened also during the later periods of Dvaita philosophers like Jayatirtha, Vyasatirtha and others, who also launched an assault on Advaita philosophy. They also began to say Maya is a big category in Advaita Vedanta. So we can see this misrepresentation. So you can just see. So I'm giving an example. So this created a lot of interesting polemical and metaphysical warfare mostly between the Dvaita philosophers like Jayatirtha, Vyasatirtha and others. That was long after Ramanuja. And Advaitins. And Advaitins writers like Khandana Khandakadya, Sriharsha, Tattwapratipika, actually Chitsukhi, Anandabodha Nyayadipavali, and then Panchapadika Vivarana and Panchapadika itself written by Padmapada. In all these books, there is so much of emphasis on the idea of Mithyatvam as a defense, as an attempt to defend the Advaita Vedanta against the intellectual or dialectical onslaughts of Dvaitins. So I'm just giving an example of how in Indian philosophy there's a golden era. In one way, this intellectual warfare created some of the most sublime philosophical works. As a student of Western philosophy, which I happen to be, when I think of this golden era, can you imagine what happened after Augustine? So you can imagine, right from 3rd century, 4th century BC up to 2nd century AD in Greek philosophy. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle and the Neoplatonic writers and so on, all these great writers Plato was a great figure. So also Aristotle. After Augustine came, philosophy was practically buried. And later, higher philosophy re-emerged only with Immanuel Kant in Germany. Now, in India, it did not happen. Greek scholars, all writing in mighty philosophical, pedantic Sanskrit, of course, it did not touch down the masses. These books will be written in Benares or some other centers of learning, and it will become popular among this limited number of scholars, will be discussed and rediscussed and debated, and somebody will write a reply. For example, Madhusudana's Advaita Siddhi was being taught to one Madhva scholar who was against Advaita. Madhusudana himself taught Advaita Siddhi. And every day, this gentleman, his disciple, went and wrote a refutation of what he was learning from his guru. And as a Guru Dakshina, at the end of 3-4 years of learning, the disciple presented to Madhusudana a refutation of the Guru's own book, which he was learning for 3-4 years. You may think it is a bit of an outrage, but there is also a great, the intellectual culture, the spiritual culture, philosophical culture. It just soared such magnificent heights in those days. That's what I'm talking about. The same thing happened. And another important thing I want to mention, this is also very important. Most of these Advaitins who were who were defending Advaita philosophy, they were going to their temples every day, they were praying to their deities every day, in societies. Because this is especially important for us to remember when we discuss this intellectual phenomena in Western audience. All these writers were defending Advaita. Madhusudana was one of the greatest devotees of Lord Krishna. He wrote Gudartha Deepika, and he says, my most cherished, beautiful, dearest ideal of God is the little Krishna, the little boy Krishna, who is playing a beautiful song on his flute. That is my own ideal of the highest reality. Krishnan Param. Beyond this Krishna, apart from this Krishna ideal, I have no other God. And he was writing Advaita Siddhi, which is a very dialectical, strongly dialectical work, refuting Vyasatirtha's Nyayamrita, who was himself a great devotee. So you can imagine all this. This should be kept in mind. You know why I'm reminding this? In many modern writings, you find people do not remember this aspect. They don't mention this because they may not have read the life of these great intellectuals. All these Advaitins were going to their temples every day, doing puja every day. So, Ishwarānugrihādeva pumsam Advaita vasana. We all get a taste for Advaita only by the grace of God. It's an important thing to remember. Now, coming to Ramanuja's system of philosophy, I am coming closer to the subject now. As I mentioned, Ramanuja believed that this world is not unreal the way Advaitins were trying to make out. The world is real. Jivas are real. And God, Vishnu Vasudeva, as an indweller, lives in the hearts of all. At the same time, there is not total identity. So when you talk about identity, you have to remember 3 types of differences or bheda are normally accepted in Vedantic philosophy. One is Sajadiya Bheda, Vijadiya Bheda, and Swagata Bheda. When I explain this, it becomes very simple. So Brahman of Vishnu Vasudeva, according to Ramanuja, is devoid of Sajadiya Bheda and Vijadiya Bheda. What is Sajadiya Bheda? For example, 2 cows, the same jadi, the same genre, the same category, but they are not the same. There is similarity, but not total identity, because every cow is different from every other cow. Every human being is different from every other human being. It is called Sajadiya Bheda. So, this distinction Ramanuja does not accept. It's an external distinction. The second external distinction is Vijadiya Bheda. That means distinction across species, across kind. A cow and human being, two different jatis, two different genus. So that is difference across species, two different species. Ramanuja doesn't accept. But he accepts Swagata Bheda. What is Swagata Bheda? It's an internal distinction. For example, you are a single personality, your hand is different from your head. Your head is different from some other part of your human body. It is called Swagata Bheda. Like that, Ramanuja says that there is no Sajadiya Bheda or any kind of external distinction between God and the world and different jivas. At the same time, there is Swagata Bheda. For example, my left hand is not my right hand. My head is not my hand. It's a difference. Same human body, the same human being, but each party is different from each other party. So that distinction is called internal distinction. That is accepted by Ramanuja, but not external distinctions. In other words, it means that the differentiation happens in three ways: Sajadiya, Vijadiya and Swagata Bhedas. That is, no two human beings can be same. That is Sajadiya. They are same human beings, but they are not the same. And Vijadiya, human beings and an animal or something else. And Swagata, the same human being, but different parts of the human body. Like that, within God, all the jivas, all of us, all the living beings, and also this world exists, but not the same. My left hand is different from my right hand. My head is different from my hand. So internal distinctions do exist, but the Brahman is devoid of external distinctions, Sajadiya and Vijadiya Bhedas. This is an important thing to understand when we try to understand Ramanuja's system. Chit, Achit, Viśiṣṭādvaita. Means Chit, all jivas have got Chaitanya, Chit. Achit, the external phenomenal world, devoid of jiva, Chaitanya. They are distinct from God, but they are not totally distinct. They are not identical. So, this is an important thing. In Shankaracharya's system, because when we compare this, we can understand. In Shankaracharya's system, and that is very interesting, he says, distinctions, whether Sajadiya, Vijadiya, Swagata Bhedas, external or internal distinctions, are related to Nama and Rupa, name and form. And of course practical utility. I mean, for example, a pot has one form, a pot of clay has one form, a jar made of clay has another form. So two different rupas, two different forms. So you give them two different names. And you use for different purposes, vyavahara, I mean use practical utility. But you break them, they all become one with clay. So, according to Shankara's system, in an absolutistic sense, this name and form do not make any distinction. So, Swagata Bheda also is rejected by Shankarite followers, Advaita followers, but Ramanuja accepts Swagata Bheda or internal distinction. This is one important thing. And another, so I'm trying to take you from known to unknown. That means from what we know a lot about Advaita. So let us approach Viśiṣṭādvaita from this perspective. Remember, Viśiṣṭādvaita is also a great spiritual system. We should always remember, no one can say, as frequently it's done in Western theological systems. For example, when Protestants, Martin Luther came, he totally rejects, all the saints are rejected, everything is rejected. It becomes an entirely different approach to Christian faith. That kind of total rejection of another system did not and doesn't exist in Vedantic traditions. Now, another important thing. In Advaita Vedanta, Shankaracharya system, when we attain spiritual liberation, we become one with Brahman. Brahmavid Brahmaiva Bhavati. An hour of Brahman becomes Brahman itself. This is a statement in the Taittiriya Upanishad. An hour of Brahman becomes non-distinct from Brahman. Body may be there. That distinction that you have the human body, you eat food, you travel. So how can you call Brahman? So Advaita Vedanta will tell you it's all happened at the Indriya level, at the level of senses. That doesn't count. Brahmajnani, an hour of Brahman, every minute realizes his identity with Brahman. So he becomes non-distinct from Brahman itself. Again, this has led to a lot of criticism by those who didn't understand the true meaning. It doesn't mean that we are Brahman, so we are like piece of stone. Even the great Aurobindo made the most prodigious blunder of misinterpreting Advaita. He says Shankaracharya's Brahman is inactive like a stone. You can find in Aurobindo's. So even the great Indian writers, J. Krishnamurti, Aurobindo, and many others, have made very, very almost laughable blunders in their attempt to misrepresent Vedanta. That's partly because they didn't study Vedanta from a teacher the way the way the scriptures are to be studied. So what it means is, a Brahmajnani, over a Brahman, will always have in his mind that that identity, well, I am something, I am not this body, not this mind, not intellect. You can just see Ramanuja's example, close to our own times. Or Ramana Maharshi, close to our own times. Now, you see, you can find Ramana Maharshi sitting there in some kind of a trance, looking at something. But the same Ramana Maharshi is walking, video is available, walking with a cow, walking Lakshmi cow and all that. Before Ramana Maharshi, see Ramakrishna. Ramakrishna was suffering from cancer, terrible pain. And at some point, he will feel the pain, he will tell. But the same pain, he will go into samadhi. Everything is gone. Cancer is forgotten, the terrible pain is forgotten. So we can see, when the body consciousness is transcended, there is no pain. When you are in the realm of body consciousness, the bodily or mental pains, all these are experienced. That's called Bhavamukha. That state is common to all, is for all the great spiritual teachers. Shankaracharya, after realizing everything, he was working hard. He was working harder than all the modern executives of Bay Area. The amount of work the Shankaracharya did in 32 years, it will be much more than the amount of work that done by all the big executives. I can give an example. Gandhiji, just before his passing away, he made a statement. Shankara, he says, Shankara in his short span of life accomplished more than what the British tried to undo in their 190 years. This statement was repeated by K.M. Munshi, the founder of Bharati Vidya Bhavan. So, writing these great books, poetry, traveling all over India for a time, building monasteries, temples, and 10 monastic orders, and all within 32 years. So you can imagine. So he did all this after realizing Brahman. Sri Ramakrishna kept preaching and teaching long after his spiritual realization. So, what it means is, these great spiritual personalities, after reaching Advaita, after attaining Advaitic experience, they again, at their own will, come down to the Dvaita level and teach the world. This is not often understood. So, but at the same time, when they experience the Advaitic identity with Brahman, then they become one with Brahman. In Ramanuja system, it is somewhat different. Ramanuja, in Viśiṣṭādvaita system, talks about different modes of moksha or liberation. It is called Salokyam, Samipyam, Sarupyam and Sayujyam. There is one state called Sashti, which is a special contribution of Bhagavata Purana, which is not frequently referred to. Bhagavata Purana is an important book. Ramanuja could have considered this as an important book to support his system, but Ramanuja didn't seem to have anything to do with Bhagavata Purana. But so Ramanuja system, the first is Salokyam. When you practice spiritual disciplines, gradually you experience that you are living in the same world as Vishnu, Narayana. You feel you are in Vaikuntha. So the feeling that you are in close proximity, you are living, you attained Vishnu's realm. More like in Abrahamic tradition, Christian tradition, God in heaven concept idea. This is the first stage, the lowest grade. Means you called Salokyam. You are in the same loka. You are in the same world, Vishnu loka. You attain your entry, you reach Vishnu loka. The second one is Samipyam, close proximity. You feel you are living very close, very near, the quality of being very near to your chosen Ishta, that is Vishnu, the second state. The third state is called Sarupyam. You get the same form. So, all these highly elevated souls at this advanced stage, that's the third highest stage, third grade, the highest, just one below the highest, so to speak, Sarupyam. You have the same form. So you often find in many of the mythological books depicting great devotees of Vishnu have more or less the same dress, same Vishnu's form, Sarupyam. And Sayujyam, union and one becoming one with. But this again is different from the experience of total identity with Brahman as found in Advaita. Advaita says Brahmavid Brahmaiva Bhavati. Brahmajnani or the knower of Brahman becomes Brahman itself. That total identity is not attainable in Ramanuja system. I mean, you are completely joined with your Ishtadevata, the highest. Again, your individuality of your jivatva is not completely erased as in Advaita. It is retained, but still you become totally identified with Brahman. That's the highest state of liberation in Ramanuja system. It's called Sayujyam. Before Sayujyam and after Sarupyam, there is one state called Sashti in Bhagavata Purana. That makes it 5. Sashti here means getting all the qualities, the powers of the deity. This is just before Sayujyam. Now, I want to give a few examples of some of the Upanishadic statements which in a way support Ramanuja system, but if you go deeper, it turns to Advaita. I can take one important text. It is found, those who are interested, you can see it's found in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad is called in Antaryami Brahmana, which we discussed at some point of time when we were discussing Advaita. This is a mantra, 3rd chapter, 7th Brahmana, third mantra you find. Ye prithiviyam tishtan prithivyaha antaraha yem prithivina veda yasya prithivi shariram ye prithivim andaro yamayedi eshate atma antaryami amritaha. Very, very famous verse. Ye prithiviyam tishtan prithivyaha antaraha yem prithivina veda yasya prithivi shariram ye prithivim antaro yamayedi eshate atma antaryami amritaha. The one who inhabits the earth but is within the earth, whom the earth doesn't know, whose body is the earth, and who controls the earth from within, is the internal ruler, Antaryami. That is a clear support to Ramanuja's system. Actually, this verse can be called one of the most important Upanishadic statements that directly supports Ramanuja's system. Antaryami amritaha. So what it means is, Shankara's commentary also there. So what it essentially means is, all people, there are so many things that grow on this earth. Iha prithivyam tishtan, what it means, those who inhabit, those who stand on this earth as a meaning. In that case, that is Brahman, that is Antaryami, that is the indweller, that is the supreme reality. But no, there are trees and mountains and human beings, they all stand, inhabit this earth. So they cannot be called the indweller, the supreme spiritual principle. So in order to dive home that point, this is Prithivyaha Antaraha. It is within, it exists within the earth. Within the earth, if you say within, below the earth, there are bauxite, iron ore, everything, gold ore, everything. So in order to avoid that misinterpretation, it says, whom the earth doesn't know, yam prithvi naveda. So he stands on this earth, inhabits on this earth, but is within the earth. And the earth doesn't know about it. Yasya prithvi shariram, and it means, and the earth is his body. The earth, that supreme reality manifests using this earth as a vehicle, as a body. And then, yaha prithivim antaro yamayati, the one who controls this earth from within. Eshate atma antaryami amritaha. This is your own immortal Atman. Now, the point is, it goes like that, and there are a number of slokas. This is the 3rd, and up to 23rd sloka, this continues. So many things are taken. The one who exists on this, but is within it, doesn't know, but it is the indweller. And then, towards the end, on the 23rd mantra says, Adrishto, Drashta, Asuta, Sroda, Amado, Manta, Avijñādo, Vijñāda, Nanyatosmi, Drashta, Nanyatosmi, Sroda, Nanyatosmi, Manta, Nanyatosmi, Vijñāda, Eshate Atma, Antaryami, Amritaha, Ata, Anyadattam, Tato, Haudalaga, Arunihi, Upararama. This is the mantra, 23rd. Now you can imagine, this is pure Advaita. So you can imagine the same chapter, the same portion of Vedic mantras, a number of Vedic mantras, Upanishadic mantras are presented. At the beginning you may feel, it supports this Antaryami ideal. The Supreme Lord is residing in everything, it is Antaryami. But then he says, it is never seen, but is the witness. It is never heard, it is the hearer. It is never thought, but is a thinker. It is never known, but is the knower, and so on. So, This Antaryami, this Brahman, this supreme reality cannot be known by hearing, by seeing, by thinking, by speculating. At the same time, all our actions, like hearing, thinking, seeing, speculating, all these happen because the supreme divine principle is residing within us. So, and that supreme divine principle cannot be defined in terms of attributes, in terms of name and form, in terms of any qualities. It transcends all descriptions, all definitions. It is one supreme divine reality present in everything and present everywhere, which cannot be explained. Now, the fact that the absolute reality cannot really be explained in terms of name, form, or characteristics, that is Advaita. Ramanuja's system says that God can be explained in terms of certain characteristics. So, according to Ramanuja's system, Sagala Kalyana Guna Nidhi, God is a repository of all auspicious characteristics. That definition is meant to exclude the possibility of any association with any inauspicious characteristics. That is Ramanuja's argument. So remember, Ramanuja's system is a very beautiful monotheistic system, but you have to remember the monotheistic system, in its highest level, it becomes one with Advaita. So, I already mentioned this in the early state. For example, Ramanuja says, the word Maya stands for God's power. That's another important idea. According to Ramanuja, Maya is God's power. In fact, actually, Maya as God's power, that expression comes in Gita Bhashya, Shankaracharya's Bhashya. Vaishnavim Shaktim, Sumayam Vaishnavim Shaktim. So God created this world using His own power called Maya. That idea can be found in Shankaracharya's own commentary in the Bodhgata introduction. It's almost same. Ramanuja system. But then that Maya is only a way of explaining the inscrutable, mysterious, inexplicable, non-definable phenomena of this world, because it is not permanent, it doesn't exist without any change, the past, the present and future. So it cannot be designated as the real Paramarthika. But it is not absolutely unreal, it is there. But it is part of Nama and Rupa. That part is not accepted by Ramanuja. So Ramanuja says Maya is real. Maya stands for God's power of creating this world. And this created world is real. And his own word, Viśiṣṭārtha sargagari shakti. That is Ramanuja's definition of Maya. Viśiṣṭārtha sargagari. Sarga means srishti, creation. Viśiṣṭā means this multifarious, manifold, diverse phenomena. This constituted by Nama and Rupa, different names and forms and causations, creating this vivid, graphic, empirical phenomena. That power is real, and the world that power creates also is real for Ramanuja. He doesn't accept that it is vyavahariga, so paramarthika, vyavahariga, pratibhasika. I mean, that category Ramanuja doesn't accept. So this is an important distinction. And Ramanuja doesn't, again, he finds problems with the concept of Maya. That again, I mentioned this earlier. It's very interesting. Shankaracharya says, Maya is Bhavarupa. At the same time, it is Ajnana, it is ignorance. So Ramanuja says, if it is ignorance, how can it be a positive entity, Bhavarupa, causing the creation of the world? The Shankaracharya, the Advaitins will say, well, Maya and also its so-called creation, all within this relative phenomenon, philosophical systems. Thank you, Namaskar. We can have interaction. You are most welcome.
Sanjay, go ahead, please.
Maharaj, when you describe the Vedas, what I'm kind of relating to that is, in a way, what Swamiji said, Swami Vivekananda, about amoeba and the human, right? It's a one of degrees and not in the form.
Yeah.
I think I'm relating to that. And second part is also when we talk about Patanjali Yoga Sutra or the Chitta, there is differences, right? The Veda, the level, we do have the differences in the sense, if all the Atmas are one, where is the karmas or my samskaras, vatanas, and where are they stored? That is how I'm reflecting. Your thoughts, Maharaj?
Yeah. So, Swamiji's statement, that's what we were actually talking about. The difference between an amoeba and a Buddha is not one of degrees, but not of kind. In amoeba, the same Atman is reflection, manifestation, is at a very limited level, and in an enlightened, spiritually enlightened person, like Buddha, it is in full effulgence. So, just like, for example, Buddha is like a pot of water, with pure water. The sun reflects in all its effulgence. An amoeba is like a muddy water. The sun's reflection will be very, very vague, may not be very clear. So just as we progress in our own spiritual evolution, we become better and better reflective media. This is what happens. So you're talking about Patanjali Yoga Sutra. I would remember,
No, my question was more on the Vedas. When it
Veda.
describes the Vedas in Viśiṣṭādvaita, is it something similar we're talking?
No, the Ramanuja's system is not in many ways linked to Patanjali's system. It's a much more ancient one. Patanjali's system did not evolve much after the early commentators like Vyasa Bhashi and others.
The way I'm reflecting, I was mostly commenting on the Vedas that we're discussing, right? Now, when we look at all the previous lectures, there is definitely unity of all the Atmas in the Advaitic way, but there is still separate because my samskaras, this is different from another person's samskaras.
That's right.
All our samskaras and vasanas, chittas are different. That's where the Veda comes.
Okay.
But at the same level, we are all unified from the Atma.
That is true. Well, this can be, suppose you take a fruit, there is an outer shell, beneath there is the fleshy part of the fruit, and inside there is a seed. So, the Advaitins will tell you the seed is the essence of the fruit, because from the seed alone the tree can emerge. Okay. If you take the seed and sow it, another tree will come. But the seed doesn't actually exist without the outer shell. Okay. Now, Shankarite system is called monistic idealism, where it is focused on that absolute reality which remains all the time. It's called Paramarthika Sattva, which is the essence of everything. But at the same time, to live in this world, to exist in this world, you have to accept, you have to be at Advaita level to live in this world. But living in this world at Advaita level, you practice spiritual disciplines, and then living in this world, practicing spiritual disciplines, at some point you realize your identity with the Supreme, which is transempirical. But you don't physically leave this world. You understand there's a mango, but you understand the mango tree from which you got this mango came from the seed. If you plant the seed only, you get a mango tree. If you plant the outer shell of the mango, you won't get a mango tree. So, what is the source of the mango tree? The seed. But in this world, the seed alone cannot exist, really. It cannot come into existence. It needs outer shell also. So, Ramanuja's system is more realistic. That is true. Ramanuja's system is more realistic. Advaita is more idealistic. So, that's why it's called conditioned Advaita or Viśiṣṭādvaita, qualified non-dualism. That's the English translation. So, that's why Ramanuja's system is certainly closer to our everyday real world. But what we experience in our everyday real world, real life, may not be the whole truth. It doesn't mean that we should not know the transcendental truth. We can know the transcendental truth, but at the same time we cannot live at the transcendental truth level. See, Ramakrishna could not drink even water when he was in Samadhi. He could not drink water. To eat food, he has to come down from Samadhi. Remember? So, in fact, to bring his own mind to body consciousness level, he had to say, I want to drink water. What do you say, Saugata, you remember? He has to force his own mind to come to Dvaita level, empirical level, by expressing a desire to drink water. Remember. So remember, no one lives at the Advaita level. See, Ramanuja says, you put Advaita in your pocket and live in this world. He did not say you hold Advaita in right hand, only somewhere in your pocket you take. But when you feel, because any non-Advaitic system has some remote possibility of becoming fanatical. That's an important thing. The moment you define God in terms of name and form and attributes, you can say the other God is not as good as my God. That's a problem with most of the monotheistic religions. Everywhere you can find. The more monotheistic, the more doctrinaire they become, the more fanatical and more problems in the world. So Advaita as an ideal should be kept in mind, and you can live at Dvaita level. I give the example of Shankaracharya. He talks about, he installed the temples, all the puja, even Kanchipuram, Kanchi Shankaracharya, what is there? The Saundarya Lahari was, he chanted, stood in front of Kanchi Kamakshi and recited Saundarya Lahari. Just imagine. We went to other Shiva temples, Shiva Varadakshava Stotra. So you can imagine all the great, sublime, spiritual, devotional poetry were recited standing in front of different deities. But Yadava Prakasa didn't do that. Yadava Prakasa held in his hand some Advaitic text and he was interpreting in a way that Ramanuja thought Yadava Prakasa was a dry, intellectual, nihilistic Advaitin. So that must have created this revolt. More like Totapuri. I can imagine, I give this example in my last class. Totapuri was comparing Sri Ramakrishna's doing bhajan into chapati making. In that case, Shankaracharya himself was a big wholesale chapati manufacturer. All the devotional poetry is like so many chapatis. And you can imagine. So, real Advaita, it accommodates Viśiṣṭādvaita, Dvaita, Nimbarka, Vallabha, and all of this. That's an important point. In fact, that's a great work Madhusudana Saraswati did in Gurartha Deepika. It's a well-known book. Gurartha Deepika, I have written very elaborate articles on this subject. It's available in some book form you can get. So, Madhusudana, who came in 16th century, his main contribution was he retrieved and he revived the devotional tradition of Advaita, which was for some time lost during the dialectical warfare between Dvaitins and Advaitins, right from 11th century up to 16th century. It's a great work of Madhusudana. As you mentioned, in real life, Viśiṣṭādvaita appears to be more realistic. But the most realistic may not be the highest or the most idealistic. So you keep the most idealistic with you, and then when you live in this world, you certainly will be living the world of what is apparently more realistic. That is true. Many of the monotheistic ideas are very similar to Ramanuja. For example, you can imagine in certain religions, they would tell you God has all the qualities and characteristics, but no form. Actually, how can you have characteristics and qualities without a form? God has compassion. So, if God has a compassion, then He should have some attributes with which He demonstrates His compassion. So, attributes and characteristics devoid of form may be slightly illogical. So, that's the idea behind. But main thing, because again I tell you, Ramanuja's system is more of a philosophy of religion rather than pure philosophy. Religion and theology are closely linked to that. And it's an interesting thing to remember.
One last comment, Maharaj. I'll let others.
But I want to add one more point in my remarks, but the glory and greatness of these theistic systems is there is not one word against anyone who doesn't belong to your own religion. Absolutely no. You find in any of the Vaishnava system, Advaita of course naturally is all accommodating, universal and humanistic. Also all the Vaishnavite system of Vallabhacharya, Nimbarka, Ramanuja, Chaitanya, all that you find. There is always a humane, compassionate approach. In Dvaita system, unfortunately, many of the Dvaita writers, they used invectives when they criticized Advaitins, Mayavadins and Nityanaraga Vasinaha, those who are eternal, the residents of eternal hell. Such words are used only at the dialectical level. There was no fighting or anything. So but in Ramanuja system there is always a respectful. In Ramanuja system and also in Advaita Shankaracharya system, there is a very polite, highly sophisticated, refined approach, even while referring to the opponents. Except in what I mentioned, this Vedanta statement in Sadadushani, where he says Advaitins are called Prachanna Bauddhas. That is Vedanta Desika used the word. So that word is there. Such expression, they are Buddhist incognito. Buddhist again you have to remember, that also needs explanation to those who listen to this. The word Buddhist or Bauddha was used during those centuries because Buddhism by then had become some kind of a world-negating, life-negating nihilism. That was totally different and therefore it's a departure from Buddha's original philosophy based on Tripitakas and the Four Noble Truths. So in many of these books, there are references to Bauddhas, followers of Buddha. That's again is a reference to certain sects of Buddhists in India who have become world-negating nihilists. Those who don't know Indian history will be mystified, will misunderstand. So that's the explanation to be kept in mind. Thank you.
Sanjay, you were trying to do a follow-up?
No, I'll let others to ask questions. I'll come back.
No, somebody
Okay.
else.
Saugata, you're next.
Pranam Maharaj.
Yeah.
So this thing is, when you concentrate, chitta vritti nirodha happens, and you see the world Chaitanyamaya. which means that you see the rope. So rope is like the Chaitanya in the snake rope example,
Yeah.
which means the rope is the essence of the snake-like world.
Yeah.
Is that a correct?
Yeah, that is
understanding?
Advaita, what you said, and Brahmajnani looks at this world, he doesn't see the world, he sees this world as non-different from Brahman in that state. But again, when the same Brahmajnani, when he lives in this world, he may not be always living in that state. He doesn't forget it, but he can, anytime he can always recollect that experience that he already had. That's the idea behind.
So when Thakur touched Swamiji,
Yeah.
he was seeing everything Chaitanya-maya.
Yeah.
So that state, is it, so basically that state can come anytime if he wished?
No, that state can come only when the disciple is ready for it. When the disciple is ready for it. You can find even in the case of Swami Abhedanandaji, Sri Ramakrishna did not like when Swamiji tried to transmit, touched him and somehow Abhedanandaji created. And Sri Ramakrishna himself said you should not have done it, Remember that. That is found in Abhedanandaji's life. So, when Sri Ramakrishna transmitted the power to Swamiji, it had a positive effect because Swamiji was ready to absorb it. But Swami Abhedananda was not ready to absorb it when Swamiji tried to do something like that, So Sri Ramakrishna actually took Swamiji to task for that. You remember that incident? So it doesn't happen to everyone. And even Hazra, no Hazra, yes, no, Hazra, but Sri Ramakrishna's own follower, not Hazra, but the other one, yeah. He wanted that kind of experience, but that created problems for him. And he had to be brought down to the level, Yeah. In Dakshineshwar. When Sri Ramakrishna, one of Sri Ramakrishna's own attendant wanted him to give him that power. And then, all right, but he could not absorb it. So it works only in the case of those who reach that level of fitness. It's not that no one distributes like that. Nothing happens. It doesn't happen. Yeah.
So in the snake and rope example, so the rope is kind of like the Chaitanya-maya state.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Thank you.
In that analogy, it is true. Yeah.
Thank you. Fine.
So thank you for these questions and
David, your question is next.
yeah. You're most welcome. Anybody else? Yeah.
Hello,
David.
Swami.
David, yeah.
My question is a follow-up about what you were saying about Totapuri.
Yeah.
I guess, how could we call Totapuri a advanced soul if he did not understand? There's several flaws that we see. One is the clapping hands with the chapati, chapatis, even though Shankara was a great devotee of the mother.
Yeah.
Another time, getting enraged when somebody took something from the Duni fire, so he still had a problem with anger.
Yeah.
Still had a problem with identification with the body, and he wanted to drown. So we see many flaws in him, and I thought to realize that somebody who had attained the highest would not have flaws like that. How were we to understand that?
Yeah, that is true. But even a highly advanced soul, sometimes some samskaras from previous life cycles, his own orthodoxy or his own cutthroat dedication to Advaita may manifest in this form of it. It could happen. But in Totapuri's case, you find finally he realized and he himself finally accepted Mother. If you are not an advanced soul, this would not have happened. He was not just a dialectician, he was a great sadhaka. He was a great practitioner of Advaita. That's why he could realize his own blunder and he went back. He returned from Dakshineshwar as a much more enlightened person than he was when he just came. So the difference between a sincere spiritual seeker and somebody who is just an armchair philosopher is a sincere spiritual seeker. He will immediately realize when something is pointed out to him. But an armchair philosopher will not realize that. So this happened even in Sri Ramakrishna's life, he wanted to erase the least bit of his sense of pride of being Brahmin, born in that, all that privilege he wanted to erase all days by going to nearby home and cleaning the place of all that you find in Sri Ramakrishna. So Sri Ramakrishna himself went through all this and became perfect. Totapuri may not have gone through all this actually. When Swami Vivekananda's travels during his travels, sometimes when he felt this, I won't go there, I won't have anything to do with them. This kind of thoughts came. Immediately Swamiji realized, so that happens to advanced souls also. In Totapuri's case, of course, Swami Saradanandi says that Mother brought him there to make him more perfect than he was before his coming. So we should not focus too much on that little flaw. He was a great realized person. But this only, remember, I think we sometimes imagine one should be 100% like a stone, or it's not, or otherwise is all gone. It's not that way. Some advanced souls sometimes at some point will show some vestige of some old samskaras. It could happen. But the person realizes and he rectifies. That's the idea behind. Yeah.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you.
And now, the last question, Sanjay.
Yeah, Sanjay. Yeah.
Maharaj, my observation, I want to get your comment. When I look at Viśiṣṭādvaita, so when you look at, I relate that to Kathopanishad. So when Advaita is, when you are in the Samadhi state, mind is not there. You go beyond the mind. And that experience when you're back, you cannot describe it because that mind is not active there at that time. You go transcend the power of mind. Now, what I'm understanding is Viśiṣṭādvaita tries to appease the mind to understand, to see the differences. So in a way, Viśiṣṭādvaita is probably one step below Advaita because it tries to give a little bit of understanding to the mind which is questioning everything. That's how I'm relating to Viśiṣṭādvaita. Your comment?
I think, in maybe that if I don't call it below or above, I won't use those terms because that can lead to different views. But one point is, Advaita accommodates within it Viśiṣṭādvaita. But Viśiṣṭādvaita cannot be to accommodate Advaita within it. That's the important thing. Because Viśiṣṭādvaita gives a designation to Vishnu, to God, Vishnu Narayana. And Vishnu Loka, all that. But it is so definite, so simple, it can certainly have a great appeal to the majority of devotees. It has a great appeal because it encourages you to practice certain disciplines, daily devotion, pray, and so the word in Viśiṣṭādvaita, the God idea is linked to Sri. So we will discuss that later.
My comment, Maharaj, is more about Viśiṣṭādvaita can be understood by the mind. I think
That's what I'm talking about.
Understand.
That's what I'm talking about. So Viśiṣṭādvaita is more realistic in the normal life of a person because You can, Ramanuja in one of his commentaries in the Gita sloka, that's a very, very important, it's a very famous statement from Ramanuja. He says, at the beginning, a devotee may pray to God, asking for fulfilling his desires. Suppose a person who has got health problem, praying for health, who has not enough money, praying for wealth, is perfectly okay. Udara sarvayevayade, in that context it comes there. So, artho jijñāsudartharthi jnani. So, all the different levels. It's all right, it's okay for you to pray to God for your material needs, nothing wrong in it.
Yeah.
And as a result, when God fulfills your expectations, your wants, you feel grateful to God, and then you continue praying and doing spiritual practices out of a sense of gratitude to God, because He has fulfilled, He has answered your prayers. So gradually, these devotional practices become more unselfish, without a desire. So first you pray for some, and then God answers your prayers. And then out of a sense of gratitude, you feel an intimate relationship with God. So you continue the same spiritual disciplines without any selfish motive. This is a gradual evolution. That's a very realistic life-related approach. So Ramanuja's system is in a very, very comprehensive devotion system, no doubt about it. Absolutely. Yeah. So in a way, in my opinion, whenever there is an element of fanaticism, even in the name of Advaita, Yadav Prakasha showed that. Yadav Prakasha was teaching Advaita to Ramanuja. Ramanuja didn't like that interpretation. Actually, there was a great Viśiṣṭādvaita Yamunacharya before Ramanuja. He also is a great writer, very humanistic. But Yadav Prakasha was a great scholar. But perhaps he didn't like, Ramanuja did not like Yadav Prakasha's own interpretation. So he had some different opinion. So that's a big story which I don't want to go in details into. So in this way, Advaita also can sometimes lead to fanaticism. But to that extent is a departure from the original Advaita of Shankaracharya. That's what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Maharaj, Thakur also gave a good example about Viśiṣṭādvaita
Yeah.
In terms of will of all, like, will.
Yeah. The fruit, Yeah.
Yeah, true.
Actually, in a way it is true. If you believe the seed alone is the reality, that's truth. From seed alone the tree can come, but the seed alone cannot exist. The seed comes to you in the form of the teachings. Tomorrow is the third last session, 10 o'clock. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Pranamastu.
RāMANUJA.
Namaskar.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.